A gentle welcome to the ancient world. Hello, my dear friend. Welcome to this quiet, peaceful evening. I'm so glad you're here with me tonight. As the world outside grows still and the day's worries begin to fade away, like morning mist disappearing in the warmth of sunrise. Tonight, I want to take you on a very special journey. A journey that begins here, in this comfortable, safe space where you rest, and travels across time and space to ancient lands, where the air was perfumed with jasmine and cardamom, where the stars shone brighter than diamonds, and where stories had the power to change the very fabric of reality. Let yourself settle deeper into comfort now. Feel your body sinking into the softness beneath you, like sinking into a cloud or floating on the gentlest ocean waves. Your breathing is already becoming slower, more peaceful, more rhythmic, like the breathing of someone who's completely at ease. Close your eyes if you haven't already, and let your mind begin to drift. Drift away from today, from tomorrow, from all the little concerns that usually occupy your thoughts. Tonight, there is only this moment, only this story, only this peaceful journey we'll take together. Picture, if you will, a vast desert kingdom, thousands of years ago, where caravans of camels moved like ships across seas of golden sand, their bells chiming softly in the warm evening breeze. The air shimmers with heat during the day, but at night, it becomes cool and gentle, perfect for storytelling under the endless canopy of stars. In this kingdom, there lived a sultan, a ruler named Shahryar. Once upon a time, he had been a good man, a kind ruler, beloved by his people. His laughter could be heard echoing through the palace halls. His smile could light up the darkest rooms, and his heart was open, like a flower turned toward the sun. But that was before his trust was shattered, like a beautiful vase dropped on marble floors, before his heart learned the bitter taste of betrayal. You see, dear friend, the Sultan had loved deeply, completely, with the kind of love that makes one vulnerable, the kind of love that, when broken, can turn a heart to stone. His queen, the woman he had cherished above all others, had betrayed his trust, had broken the sacred bonds between them. And in his pain, in his anger and devastation, the Sultan made a terrible vow. a vow that would cast a shadow over his entire kingdom. Never again, he declared to the empty halls of his palace, never again will I allow my heart to be broken. If love leads only to pain, then I choose to live without it. I will marry each day, but love, I will never risk again. And so began the dark time. Every morning, the Sultan would choose a bride. The wedding would take place with great ceremony. But as dawn broke the following day, the new queen would meet her fate. This continued day after day, month after month, until the very word marriage struck fear into every household in the kingdom. The streets, once filled with music and laughter, grew quiet. Mothers hid their daughters. Fathers sent their families to distant relatives. The kingdom that had once been a place of joy and celebration became a land of whispers and shadows. The wise vizier and his extraordinary daughter. In this troubled kingdom, there lived a man of great wisdom, the Sultan's own vizier. His name was Omar, and he was known throughout the land for his gentle nature. His silver beard that caught the light like spun moonbeams, and his deep, kind eyes that seemed to hold all the wisdom of the ages. Omar had served the royal family for many years. He remembered when young Shahryar was still a prince, full of dreams and laughter. He had watched the boy grow into a man, had celebrated his coronation, had witnessed his great love, and now, with a heavy heart, he watched as that same man slowly destroyed himself and his kingdom with his pain. The vizier lived in a beautiful house, surrounded by gardens where fountain water sang gentle songs, where orange trees perfumed the air with their blossoms, and where in the evenings the family would gather to share stories and dreams. This house, this peaceful sanctuary, was home to Omar's two most precious treasures, his daughters. The elder daughter was named Scheherazade, and from the moment she could speak, it was clear that she was extraordinary. Not just in beauty, though she was indeed beautiful, with hair that cascaded like black silk, eyes that sparkled with intelligence and kindness, and a smile that could warm the coldest heart. But it was her mind, her incredible, brilliant mind, that truly set her apart. By the age of 7, she could recite poetry that made grown men weep. By 10, she had read every book in her father's vast library. By 15, she could speak 7 languages and could debate philosophy with the greatest scholars of the land. Scheherazade had a gift, a rare and precious gift. She could take the threads of imagination, weave them with the colors of emotion, and create tapestries of words. Stories so vivid, so compelling, that listeners would forget where they were. They would forget their troubles, their fears, their pain. And for a few precious hours, they would live in worlds of magic and wonder. Her younger sister was Dinazad, sweet, gentle Dinazad, who adored her elder sister with the kind of pure love that exists only between siblings who truly understand each other. Dinazad was the perfect audience for Scheherazade's stories. Her eyes would grow wide with wonder. She would gasp at the exciting parts and sigh with contentment at the beautiful endings. The two sisters were inseparable. In the mornings, they would walk through their father's gardens, discussing the books they had read. In the afternoons, they would sit by the fountain, where Scheherazade would invent new tales. And in the evenings, as the stars appeared one by one in the darkening sky, Dinazad would beg for just one more story before sleep claimed them both. But as the dark days continued in the kingdom, as more and more young women disappeared, the joy began to fade from their peaceful home as well. How could they be happy when such suffering existed so close to them? How could they laugh and tell stories when other families were torn apart by grief? One evening, as the family sat in their garden, the fountain singing its eternal song, the jasmine releasing its sweet perfume into the warm air, Scheherazade spoke words that would change everything. Words that would echo through history. Words that would save not just herself, but an entire kingdom. "Father," she said, her voice clear and strong, yet gentle as a mother's lullaby, "I have made a decision. Tomorrow morning, I want you to ask the Sultan for my hand in marriage." The garden fell completely silent. Even the fountain seemed to pause in its singing. Omar's face went pale as moonlight. Dinazade's eyes filled with tears, for they both knew, they all knew, what this decision meant. "My daughter," Omar whispered, his voice breaking like waves against rocks. "My precious child, you cannot, you must not. Do you not understand what fate awaits you by the next dawn?" He could not finish the sentence. The words were too painful to speak. But Scheherazade smiled, the same gentle, knowing smile she had worn as a child when she had some wonderful secret to share. "Dear father," she said softly, "I understand the danger, but I also understand something else. I understand the power of stories, and I truly believe, that stories can heal even the most wounded heart." She took her father's weathered hands in her young ones. "I have a plan," she continued, "not just to save myself, but to save all the daughters of this kingdom. and perhaps to help our Sultan remember the good man he once was, the man who is still there, hidden beneath all that pain and anger. The preparation and the plan. That night, as the rest of the kingdom slept, the vizier's household was filled with quiet activity. Not the frantic preparation one might expect before such a dangerous undertaking, but the calm, purposeful movements of people who understand their roles in something greater than themselves. Scheherazade sat in her room, surrounded by her most beloved books, ancient volumes of poetry, collections of folk tales from distant lands, historical chronicles that read like adventures, and philosophical treatises that explored the deepest mysteries of the human heart. She was not randomly selecting stories. Oh no, her plan was far more sophisticated than that. She was crafting something beautiful, something intricate, like a master weaver creating the most complex tapestry. Each story she chose, each tale she prepared, was a thread in a larger design. The stories must connect, she murmured to herself. As she arranged scrolls and books in careful order, each one must lead naturally to the next, like links in a golden chain. And each one must end just at the moment when curiosity peaks, when the listener cannot bear not to know what happens next. Dinarzade watched from the doorway, her young face a mixture of admiration and terror. "Sister," she whispered, "are you not afraid? Are you not even a little bit frightened of what tomorrow might bring?" Scheherazade looked up from her books, her eyes reflecting the flickering candlelight. "Of course I am afraid, little sister," she said honestly. "Only a fool would not be afraid. But fear is not the enemy of courage. Fear is simply the price we pay for caring about something important." She rose from her cushions, graceful as a dancer, and walked to the window, where the night sky stretched endlessly above them, studded with stars like diamonds scattered on black velvet. "Look at those stars, Dinarzade," she said softly. "Each one is so far away, so alone, and yet together they light up the entire sky. That's what stories do," she continued. "Each one seems small by itself, just words, just imagination, but together, when woven with love and purpose, they can illuminate the darkest places. They can reach across any distance, even the distance between a wounded heart and hope." The sisters spent that night rehearsing their plan. It was elegant in its simplicity, yet profound in its psychological understanding. Dinarzade would be allowed to visit, as sisters often were permitted to say farewell. She would ask innocently for a story. Scheherazade would begin to tell a tale so compelling, so irresistible, that even the hardened sultan would want to hear its conclusion. But here was the crucial element, the moment that would determine life or death. Scheherazade would stop the story. Just at its most exciting moment, just when the listener would be burning with curiosity, desperate to know what happened next. And dawn would be approaching, making it impossible to finish. He will have to choose, Scheherazade explained to her sister, between satisfying his curiosity and maintaining his cruel routine. And curiosity is one of the most powerful forces in the human heart, even stronger, sometimes, than pain. As the first pale light of dawn began to touch the eastern horizon, the preparation was complete. Scheherazade had bathed in rosewater. Her hair had been arranged with tiny pearls that caught the light like captured starbeams. Her gown, a masterpiece of midnight blue silk, flowed around her like water, like the night sky itself. But it was not her beauty that would save her. Beauty alone had failed to protect so many others. It was her mind, her extraordinary, brilliant mind, armed with hundreds of stories, thousands of tales, collected from every corner of the world, and arranged with the precision of a master strategist. Omar watched his daughter with a mixture of pride and terror. She looked so young, so fragile, yet he could see in her eyes the same determination that had once driven great generals to victory, the same calm courage that had inspired prophets and poets throughout history. "My daughter," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "you carry with you today not just your own life, but the hopes of every family in this kingdom, every parent who fears for their child, every sister who prays for her sibling's safety. You carry all of our dreams for a better tomorrow." Scheherazade kissed her father's forehead, then embraced her sister, holding her close for what might be the last time. "Remember," she whispered to Dinarzade, "whatever happens, the stories will continue. Stories never truly die. They live in every heart that has heard them. They grow stronger each time they are told, and someday they will heal this wounded land." The wedding and the first night. The wedding ceremony took place as the sun reached its zenith. But there was no joy in it, no celebration. The great hall of the palace, which had once hosted feasts that lasted for days, parties that brought together people from across the known world, now felt hollow, empty, like a beautiful shell washed up on a desolate shore. The guests attended out of duty, not celebration. Their faces bore masks of politeness, hiding the grief and fear underneath. Everyone knew what this ceremony meant. Everyone understood that they were witnessing not the beginning of a life together, but the countdown to yet another tragedy. Sultan Shahryar sat on his golden throne, magnificent in his royal robes, crown gleaming with precious stones. Yet his face was like carved marble, cold, distant, as if his soul had retreated so far inside himself that it could barely be glimpsed through his eyes. He had performed this ritual so many times now. It had become mechanical, automatic. He no longer saw the faces of his brides, no longer heard their names. They were just temporary figures in a play that repeated itself endlessly, with always the same tragic conclusion. But when Scheherazade entered the hall, something shifted, something so subtle that even the Sultan himself did not immediately recognize it. She walked not with the trembling steps of a victim, not with the resigned shuffle of someone going to their doom, but with the graceful confidence of a queen approaching her rightful throne. Her gown flowed around her like liquid starlight. Her head was held high, not in defiance, but in quiet dignity. And her eyes, her remarkable eyes, held no fear, no pleading. Instead, they held something far more powerful, something that had been absent from the palace for far too long. They held hope. The ceremony proceeded according to ancient custom. Vows were spoken, though they felt hollow. Rings were exchanged, though they seemed more like shackles. And finally, as the sun began its slow descent toward the western horizon, Scheherazade became, for what everyone assumed would be less than 24 hours, a queen. The evening meal was served in the Sultan's private chambers, a magnificent room overlooking the palace gardens, where fountains sang their eternal songs, where peacocks strutted among rose bushes, and where the air was perfumed with 1,000 different flowers. But the Sultan barely noticed the beauty around him. He ate mechanically, spoke only when protocol demanded it. His mind was already elsewhere, already planning the dawn execution, already choosing the next bride. The routine had become his prison, as much as it was a prison for his victims. Scheherazade, however, ate with apparent appetite. She commented on the beauty of the gardens, admired the craftsmanship of the palace decorations, spoke knowledgeably about poetry and philosophy, as if this were simply a pleasant dinner between two people getting to know each other. Her calmness was unsettling. The Sultan found himself, almost against his will, listening to her observations. They were intelligent, insightful, not the desperate chatter he had come to expect, not the pleading or weeping, but genuine conversation, the kind he hadn't experienced in years. As the evening deepened, as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Scheherazade made her request. Her voice was soft, respectful, but clear. "Your Majesty," she said, "if it would not displease you, might I ask a small favor, a final request before tomorrow's dawn?" The Sultan nodded, curious despite himself. What would she ask for? Jewels? Gold? A message to her family? Some desperate plea for mercy? "I would like to see my sister," Scheherazade continued. "My dear sister Dinarzade, just once more. You see, since we were children, we have had a tradition. Every night, before sleep, I would tell her a story. It comforts her, helps her rest peacefully. And I would like to fulfill this duty one last time." The request was so simple, so innocent, that the Sultan found no reason to refuse it. Within the hour, young Dinarzade was brought to the royal chambers. Her eyes red with recent tears, but her face determined. She knew her role. She knew what she had to do. The reunion between the sisters was tender, but not desperate. They embraced like people who trusted in tomorrow, not like people saying farewell forever. This, too, puzzled the Sultan. Why were they not weeping? Why were they not clinging to each other in despair? "Dear sister," Dinarzade said, right on cue, but her words carried genuine emotion. Could you tell me one of your wonderful stories? You know how they help me sleep peacefully. And tonight, I think I will need all the peace I can find." Scheherazade looked to the Sultan, asking permission with her eyes. He was curious now, genuinely curious. What kind of stories did this remarkable woman tell? What words could possibly bring peace on such a night as this? "You may proceed," he said, his voice softer than it had been in months. I confess myself curious about these stories that bring such comfort." And so, as the moon rose full and bright over the palace, casting silver light through the latticed windows, creating patterns of light and shadow that danced across the walls like living things, Scheherazade began her first tale, the story that would save her life and begin the healing of a kingdom. The Merchant and the Magic Lamp. "Once upon a time," Scheherazade began, her voice like honey mixed with moonlight, soft yet compelling, drawing her listeners in like a gentle current, drawing swimmers to shore. "In a city much like our own, but far, far away. In a land where the mountains touched the sky and the rivers ran silver in the sunlight." The Sultan found himself leaning forward, despite his determination to remain detached. There was something in her voice, something that seemed to reach past his defenses, past the walls he had built around his heart, and touch something deep inside, something he had thought was dead. There lived a merchant named Hassan, Scheherazade continued. And Hassan was not just any merchant. He was a man who understood that true wealth comes not from the gold in one's coffers, but from the love in one's heart. And the love of his heart was his dear wife, Yasmin. As she spoke, images seemed to materialize in the air. The listeners could almost see Hassan, a man of middle years, with kind eyes and work-worn hands, loading his camels for another trading journey, could almost smell the spices and silk, feel the desert wind, hear the bells on the camel harnesses chiming softly in the evening air. Hassan and Yasmin had been married for 15 years, Scheherazade went on, and their love had only grown stronger with time. Like wine that improves with age, like a garden that becomes more beautiful with careful tending, every journey Hassan took, every hardship he endured, was made bearable by the thought of returning home, to Yasmin's smile, to her warm embrace, to the sound of her laughter filling their simple house. The Sultan shifted uncomfortably. These words about love, about trust, about devotion, they stirred memories he had tried so hard to bury, memories of when he too had believed in such things, when he too had thought love could last forever. But this particular journey, Scheherazade continued, her voice taking on a mysterious quality, would be unlike any Hassan had ever undertaken. He had been commissioned by a wealthy nobleman to travel all the way to Baghdad, the great city of wonders, to purchase rare gems and precious artifacts, items so valuable that the journey would make Hassan's fortune if he succeeded. The journey to Baghdad took 40 days and 40 nights, through desert valleys where mirages danced, past oases where palm trees provided blessed shade, around mountains so tall they seemed to hold up the sky itself. And Hassan, dear faithful Hassan, thought of his beloved Yasmin every step of the way. Dinazade's eyes were wide with fascination, even though she knew this story, even though she and her sister had rehearsed it. She found herself caught up in the magic of Scheherazade's telling, the way her sister painted pictures with words, made distant places seem real, made fictional characters feel like dear friends. When Hassan finally reached Baghdad, Scheherazade continued, he was amazed by what he saw. The city was like nothing he had ever imagined. Buildings that reached toward the heavens, markets that stretched as far as the eye could see, people from every corner of the world, speaking in dozens of languages, selling goods he had never dreamed existed. But Hassan was a man of purpose. He did not let himself be distracted by the city's wonders. He went directly to the famous bazaar, where merchants from across the empire came to trade in the most precious commodities. Gems from the mountains of Persia, silks from the distant lands of China, spices from islands so far away that most people believed them to be myths. It was in this bazaar, Scheherazade said, her voice dropping to almost a whisper, that Hassan encountered something that would change his life forever. He was examining a particularly beautiful sapphire, blue as the deepest ocean, blue as the midnight sky, when an old woman approached him. This woman was unusual. Her hair was white as fresh snow. Her skin was weathered by countless years, but her eyes were like stars, bright and mysterious, and filled with ancient wisdom. She moved through the crowded bazaar as if she were floating, as if the press of people, the noise and chaos could not touch her. The Sultan found himself completely absorbed. When was the last time he had listened to anything, really listened, with his full attention? When was the last time his mind had been occupied, not with plans for revenge, not with bitter memories, but with simple curiosity about what would happen next? "Young man," the old woman said to Hassan, her voice like wind chimes in a gentle breeze, "you have the look of someone who travels far from home, someone who carries love in his heart like a precious cargo." Hassan was surprised. How could this stranger know anything about his circumstances, about his feelings? "You are right, grandmother," Hassan replied respectfully, for in his land, age was always honored. "I am indeed far from home, and I do carry love in my heart. Love for my wife, who waits for my return." The old woman smiled, and her smile was like sunrise, warming everything it touched. "Then perhaps," she said, reaching into the folds of her robes, "you would be interested in something truly special, something that could make your journey home far more meaningful than you ever imagined." And from her robes, she drew forth a small, simple oil lamp made of tarnished brass, nothing remarkable to look at. Nothing that would catch a casual observer's eye. Hassan looked at the lamp politely, but he was puzzled. "Forgive me, grandmother," he said, "but I am a merchant of gems and precious goods. I'm not sure I understand why you would offer me an ordinary lamp." The old woman's smile grew wider, more mysterious. "Ah," she said, "but this is no ordinary lamp. This lamp, this simple, humble lamp, contains something more valuable than all the gems in Baghdad, more precious than all the gold in the Sultan's treasury. It contains the power to grant your heart's deepest desire." Hassan laughed, not mockingly, but with gentle disbelief. "Dear grandmother," he said, "I appreciate your kindness, but surely you don't expect me to believe in magic lamps, in genies and wishes. Such things exist only in children's stories." The old woman nodded, as if she had expected this response. "Of course you don't believe," she said peacefully. "Why should you? You are a practical man, a man of the world. But tell me, what is your heart's deepest desire? What do you want more than anything else in this world?" Hassan didn't need to think. "To return safely home," he said immediately. "To see my beloved Yasmin again, to hold her in my arms and never have to leave her side again. That is all I want. That is all I have ever wanted." "Take the lamp," the old woman said simply. "Take it as a gift from one who understands the value of true love. And when you reach home, when you are reunited with your Yasmin, light the lamp, make your wish, and see what happens." Hassan was about to refuse, but something in the old woman's eyes, something ancient and knowing, made him reconsider. What harm could it do? It was just a lamp, an old, tarnished lamp. If it made this kind stranger happy to give it to him, why not accept? So Hassan took the lamp, thanked the old woman graciously, and tucked it away in his travel pack, almost forgetting about it immediately. He completed his business in Baghdad, purchased the gems and artifacts he had come for, and began the long journey home, his heart singing with joy at the thought of seeing Yasmin again. But the journey home would prove to be far more eventful than Hassan had ever imagined. For the lamp, the simple, humble lamp, was indeed magical, and its magic would soon reveal itself in ways that would astound even Hassan's wildest dreams. Scheherazade paused here, glancing toward the window, where the first faint hints of dawn were beginning to lighten the eastern sky. The night had passed so quickly, lost in the magic of storytelling, that none of them had noticed time slipping away like sand through an hourglass. "Oh my," Scheherazade said softly, "I see that dawn is approaching, and I'm afraid I won't have time to tell you what happened when Hassan reached home, what he discovered about the magic lamp, and how it changed not only his life, but the lives of everyone he loved." The Sultan felt something he hadn't experienced in years: frustration at an unfinished story, burning curiosity about what would happen next. Did the lamp really have magical powers? What would Hassan discover when he reached home? What wish would he make? For a long moment, the royal chamber was completely silent. The only sounds were the distant songs of morning birds beginning their daily concert, and the soft splash of fountains in the gardens below. The Sultan sat motionless, his face unreadable, but his mind was spinning with questions. Dinarzade looked anxiously between her sister and the Sultan. This was the crucial moment, the moment when everything would be decided, when they would learn whether stories truly had the power to change hearts, to save lives, to plant seeds of hope in even the most barren soil. Scheherazade waited patiently, her hands folded in her lap, her face serene. She had done everything she could. She had told her story with all the skill, all the love, all the hope she possessed. Now the decision rested with the man before her, the wounded sultan, who held not only her life in his hands, but the fate of her kingdom. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Sultan Shahryar spoke. His voice was quiet, thoughtful, different somehow from the cold, mechanical tone he had used for so many months. "This merchant Hassan," he said slowly, "and his lamp. You say it was truly magical, and his wife, this Yasmin, she waited faithfully for his return, even though his journeys took him away for months at a time?" "Indeed, Your Majesty," Scheherazade replied gently. "Hassan and Yasmin's love was extraordinary, built on trust that could not be shaken, faith that could not be broken, and a bond that grew stronger with every separation, every reunion." The Sultan's eyes grew distant, as if he were looking back across years and pain, to memories he had buried, memories of when he too had believed in love that could last forever, in trust that could not be broken, before his world had shattered like glass striking stone. "Tell me," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "what happened when Hassan returned home? What did he discover about the lamp? Did it truly grant his wish?" Scheherazade smiled, the same gentle smile she had shared with her father the night she had announced her decision, a smile full of hope and infinite patience. "Your Majesty," she said softly, "that is indeed a wonderful part of the story, but I'm afraid the sun is rising and dawn has broken. I know what my fate must be." But then something miraculous happened, something that hadn't occurred in all the dark months of the Sultan's reign of terror. He hesitated for the first time in longer than he could remember. He hesitated. "The story," he said, his voice uncertain, "it is unfinished, and I find myself curious about its conclusion, about Hassan and his lamp, about whether love can truly triumph over all obstacles." Scheherazade's heart began to beat faster, but she kept her voice calm, steady. "If Your Majesty wishes," she said carefully, "I could continue the tale tomorrow evening, when Hassan returns home and discovers the true power of the magical lamp." The Sultan looked at her for a long moment, his dark eyes searching her face, as if trying to understand how this young woman could remain so calm in the face of death, how she could speak of tomorrow as if it were a certainty. "Very well," he said finally, his voice stronger now, more decisive. "You may live another day. But tomorrow night, you will finish Hassan's story and tell me whether the lamp's magic is real or merely another beautiful lie." And so the first victory was won, not with weapons, not with wealth or power, but with curiosity, with the simple, universal human desire. to know what happens next. Scheherazade had planted the first seed in the Sultan's wounded heart, and like all seeds, when tended with patience and care, it would grow. As Dinarzade was escorted from the royal chambers, her eyes bright with tears of joy and relief, the sisters exchanged a look of hope, of determination. The first night was over, but there would be many more stories to tell, many more seeds to plant in the garden of the Sultan's healing heart. As the sun set on the second day, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, the royal chambers were once again prepared for what had now become an unexpected tradition. The Sultan found himself looking forward to the evening in a way he hadn't experienced for years. Throughout the day, he had found his thoughts returning to Hassan and his magical lamp, to the merchant's love for his wife, Yasmin, to questions that seemed to echo in the chambers of his heart. Pause 6 seconds. Why does love lead to such wrong separations? The Sultan muttered to himself, his voice carrying a weight of introspective sorrow. Must we suffer for the ones we cherish? Pause. Scheherazade, with her gentle yet confident voice, began once more, weaving the tale with a magic that transcended time. Hassan, our brave merchant, had faced a journey fraught with peril and magic, and now, as he returned to his beloved Yasmin, his heart was filled with a storm of emotions, mirroring the turmoil within the Sultan's own soul. Pause 4 seconds. It was the law. Was such love possible? Could trust really endure? Could hearts remain faithful, even across great distances, even through long separations? When Scheherazade entered, followed by young Dinarzade, the Sultan noticed something different about his own reactions. Instead of the cold indifference that had characterized him for so long, he felt anticipation, a warming in his chest, like the first rays of sun after the longest winter. Your Majesty, Scheherazade said with graceful courtesy, if it pleases you, I am ready to continue the tale of Hassan and his magical lamp, to tell you what he discovered when he finally returned home to his beloved Yasmin. The Sultan nodded, settling back into his cushions, like a child preparing for a beloved bedtime story. Yes, he said, his voice gentler than it had been in months. I confess, I have thought of little else all day. Please, continue your tale. Scheherazade smiled and began to weave her magic once again. As Hassan traveled home from Baghdad, she said, her voice taking on that hypnotic quality that seemed to transport listeners to other times, other places. The miles seemed to pass slowly, though his camels moved steadily, though the weather was fine. You see, Hassan was eager, more eager than he had ever been, to reach his home, to see Yasmin's face, to tell her of his adventures, and perhaps, though he barely admitted it to himself, to discover whether the old woman's lamp truly held the magic she had promised. Finally, after many days of travel, the sun crested the hill that overlooked his valley, his village, his home, and there below him, like a jewel set in green fields, was the house where Yasmin waited. Smoke rising from the chimney, gardens blooming with flowers, everything exactly as he had dreamed during those long nights in the desert. But as Hassan approached his door, his heart began to race, not with joy, but with sudden, unexpected fear. What if something had changed? What if Yasmin had grown tired of waiting? What if she, like so many others, had found comfort in someone else's arms? The Sultan shifted uncomfortably. These words struck too close to home, too close to his own painful memories, his own bitter experiences, with promises broken, trust shattered, love turned to betrayal. Hassan stood at his own threshold. Scheherazade continued. For the first time in his life, afraid to enter his own home. The lamp, the mysterious lamp, seemed to grow warm in his travel pack, as if responding to his emotional turmoil, as if it understood his deepest fears. Finally, taking a deep breath, Hassan opened the door, and there in the main room of our simple house, sat Yasmin, more beautiful than he remembered. Her hair catching the lamplight, her eyes bright with unshed tears, and when she saw him, her face lit up like the dawn itself.
"Hassan!" she cried, rising from her chair, running to him with arms outstretched. "My beloved husband, my heart, you have returned to me." And she threw herself into his arms. With such joy, such pure, overwhelming love, that Hassan felt ashamed of his momentary doubts, his unnecessary fears. They held each other for what seemed like hours, but was probably only minutes, breathing in each other's presence, feeling the rightness, the completeness that comes when two hearts, truly meant for each other, are reunited after separation. That evening, as they shared their simple dinner, Hassan told Yasmin about his adventures in Baghdad, about the merchants he had met, the wonders he had seen. But most importantly, he told her about the old woman and the mysterious lamp she had given him. "Show me this lamp," Yasmin said, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. Hassan retrieved it from his pack, the simple, tarnished brass lamp that looked so ordinary, so unremarkable. "The old woman said," Hassan explained, "that it would grant my heart's deepest desire." Yasmin took the lamp, turning it over in her hands, examining it carefully. "And what," she asked with a gentle smile, "is your heart's deepest desire, my husband? What do you want more than anything in the world?" Hassan looked at his wife, her face glowing in the warm lamplight, her eyes full of love and trust. And suddenly, he knew exactly what his deepest desire was. It wasn't wealth. It wasn't fame. It wasn't even the successful completion of his trading ventures. "I wish," he said slowly, his voice filled with emotion, "never to be separated from you again. I wish that we could be together always, that my business could be conducted right here from our home, so that I would never again have to leave your side." As soon as the words left his lips, the lamp began to glow, softly at first, then brighter, filling the room with warm golden light. And from within the light, a voice spoke, gentle, kind, like the voice of the old woman, but somehow even more ancient, even more wise. "Your wish is granted, Hassan of the pure heart," the voice said, "because your desire comes not from greed, but from love, not from selfishness, but from devotion. Your home shall become the most prosperous trading post in all the land. Merchants will come to you from every corner of the world. You will never need to travel again. Yet your business will flourish beyond your wildest dreams." And so it happened, just as the voice had promised. Within a month, word had spread about Hassan's remarkable collection, his fair dealing, his honest prices. Traders began arriving from distant cities, bringing goods to exchange, seeking Hassan's expertise. His reputation grew like ripples spreading across a still pond. But the most wonderful part, Scheherazade continued, her voice growing softer, more intimate, was not Hassan's success, not his growing wealth, but the fact that he and Yasmin were never separated again. They worked side by side, building their business, their life, their love, growing stronger with each passing day. The lamp, the magical lamp, remained with them, but it never needed to grant another wish, because Hassan had learned the most important truth of all, that true magic doesn't come from genies or mystical objects. True magic comes from love, from trust, from two hearts that beat as one. And they lived, Scheherazade concluded, in happiness and contentment for the rest of their days, their love serving as an example to all who knew them, that true devotion is the greatest treasure any person can possess. The Sultan sat in contemplation. The story had touched something deep within him, some place he had thought was sealed forever. "This Hassan," he said quietly, "he never doubted his wife, never questioned her faithfulness." "Oh, Your Majesty," Scheherazade replied gently, "Hassan was human. He had moments of fear, of uncertainty, but he had something more powerful than fear. He had faith, faith in love, faith in the bond he and Yasmin had built together, and that faith was rewarded." The seeds of healing take root. Several nights later, as the days passed into weeks, a remarkable transformation began. In the palace halls, in the royal chambers, and most importantly, in the heart of Sultan Shahryar. The evening storytelling sessions had become the highlight of his entire day. Each night, Scheherazade would weave new tales, stories of love triumphant, of trust rewarded, of hearts that remained faithful despite all trials. And each morning, the Sultan found reasons to postpone the execution. Just one more day, just one more story, just one more glimpse into worlds where love was possible. The servants whispered among themselves. The guards exchanged meaningful glances. Even the palace birds seemed to sing, with more joy, more hope, as if they sensed the change that was beginning, like spring returning after the harshest winter. One particular evening, as autumn painted the gardens in shades of gold and crimson, the Sultan made an unexpected request. "Scheherazade," he said, his voice thoughtful, "tonight, instead of a new tale, I would like you to tell me about yourself, about your life before you came here." Scheherazade was surprised, but she nodded gracefully. "What would your Majesty like to know?" "Everything," the Sultan said simply. "Your childhood, your dreams. What made you the remarkable woman who sits before me, the woman who speaks of love as if it were still possible, despite everything, despite all the pain this world contains." And so, for the first time, Scheherazade told not a fictional tale, but the true story of her own life. She spoke of growing up in her father's house, surrounded by books and learning, of the joy she found in discovering new stories, new ideas, new ways of seeing the world. She told him about her sister, sweet Dinozad, and how their bond had taught her about unconditional love, about loyalty that asks for nothing but gives everything. She spoke of her father, the wise vizier, and how his example had shown her the importance of serving something greater than oneself. "But why?" the Sultan asked, his voice heavy with old pain. "Why do you still believe in love, in trust, in all the things that cause such suffering? When they are broken." Scheherazade was quiet for a long moment, choosing her words carefully. "Your Majesty," she said finally, "I have seen in all my reading, in all the stories I have collected, that love is like the sun. Even when clouds cover it, even when storms rage, the sun itself continues to shine. It is always there, waiting for the clouds to pass." "You speak," the Sultan said bitterly, "as someone who has never been betrayed, never had her trust shattered beyond repair, never felt the agony of love turned to ash." "You are right, Your Majesty," Scheherazade admitted. "I have been fortunate, but I have seen others who have suffered as you have, and I have learned that the choice is always ours. We can let betrayal close our hearts forever, or we can choose to believe that not all love ends in pain, that not all trust leads to betrayal. It is a choice." She continued gently, between hope and despair, between faith and cynicism, between believing that we are capable of love and being loved, or accepting that we are not. "And I will always choose hope." The Sultan was quiet for a very long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was different, softer, more vulnerable. than it had been in years. "What if," he whispered, "what if I am beyond hope? What if my heart has been too damaged, too scarred, to ever trust again?" Scheherazade smiled, the gentle smile that had become so familiar, so comforting to him. "Your Majesty," she said, "the fact that you can ask that question, the fact that you can even imagine the possibility of healing, proves that hope is not dead within you. It may be buried under layers of pain, but it is there, waiting, like seeds in winter ground, for the right moment to bloom." That night, for the first time in months, the Sultan did not immediately order the morning execution. Instead, he sat by his window, looking out at the star-filled sky, thinking about seeds, about hope, about the possibility that hearts, even the most wounded hearts, could heal.
As the seasons changed and winter gave way to the first hints of spring, the transformation in Sultan Shahryar became impossible to ignore. His harsh commands became gentle requests. His cold silences gave way to thoughtful conversations. And most remarkably, his eyes, his dark, pain-filled eyes, began to show glimpses of the man he had once been. The storytelling sessions had evolved too. No longer was Scheherazade simply trying to survive. One more night. Now she was consciously choosing stories that would heal, tales that would nurture the growing seeds of hope in the Sultan's wounded heart. One evening, as spring rain drummed softly against the palace windows, creating a gentle rhythm that seemed to match the peaceful beating of hearts at rest, the Sultan asked a question that surprised them all. "Scheherazade," he said, his voice thoughtful, almost shy, "in all your stories, there are tales of forgiveness, of people who find the strength to pardon those who have wronged them. Tell me, how does one find such strength? How does one let go of anger that has burned so long? It feels like part of one's very soul." Scheherazade understood the deeper meaning behind his question. This was not about her stories anymore. This was about his own journey, his own struggle to find a way back from the dark place where pain had led him. "Your Majesty," she said gently, "I know a story about a king who faced a very similar choice. Perhaps, if you would like to hear it, it might provide some guidance, some comfort." The Sultan nodded, and Scheherazade began, her voice taking on the rhythm of rain, the cadence of healing. "Long ago, in a kingdom by the sea, there ruled a king named Darius. He was young, handsome, and deeply in love with his beautiful queen. But like you, your Majesty, King Darius discovered betrayal in the place where he least expected it. His queen, his beloved, had been false to him. And when he learned the truth, His heart broke into 1,000 pieces, each piece sharp enough to cut anyone who came near. The Sultan listened intently, seeing his own story reflected in this ancient king. "What did this Darius do?" he asked quietly. "At first," Scheherazade continued, "King Darius did exactly what you did. He built walls around his heart. He punished the innocent along with the guilty. He convinced himself that if he could not trust, he could not be hurt. But the pain did not lessen. Instead, it grew stronger, like a fire that consumes everything in its path. For 3 years, King Darius ruled with an iron fist. His kingdom became a place of fear, of sadness, where joy was forbidden, where love was seen as weakness, as folly. And slowly, very slowly, the king realized that in trying to protect himself from more pain, he had created a pain far worse than anything he had experienced before. One day, an old wise woman came to the king's court. She was bent with age, her hair white as snow, but her eyes held ancient wisdom and infinite compassion. She asked for an audience with the king. She said, when she was brought before him, "I have traveled far to bring you a gift more precious than all the gold in your treasury, more valuable than all the jewels in your crown." King Darius was curious. What gift, he asked, could possibly be so valuable? The old woman smiled, and from her simple robes, she drew forth a small, cracked mirror. The glass was clouded, the frame tarnished. It looked worthless, broken. "This mirror," she said gently, "will show you the most important truth in the world. But you must have courage to look into it and see what it reveals." King Darius, intrigued despite himself, took the mirror and looked. At first, he saw only his own face, but then, as he continued to gaze, the mirror began to show him something else. It showed him his kingdom as it truly was. He saw his people afraid, unhappy. He saw families torn apart by his harsh laws. He saw young people who had never known joy or laughter. But most importantly, the mirror showed him his own heart, and he saw that in his quest to avoid pain, he had become the very thing he had once despised. He had become a source of suffering for others, just as his queen had been a source of suffering for him. When King Darius looked up from the mirror, the old woman was watching him with infinite patience. "Now you see," she said softly, "the truth that the mirror reveals, that holding on to anger is like grasping a burning coal, intending to throw it at someone else, but it is you who gets burned." The Sultan was very quiet, very still. The story was hitting too close to home, too close to his own painful recognition of what he had become. "What happened to King Darius?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "The king," Scheherazade continued gently, realized that he had a choice to make. He could continue to let his pain control his actions, control his kingdom, control his life, or he could choose to let go, not because his queen deserved forgiveness, but because he deserved peace. "Forgiveness," she said softly, "is not about excusing the wrongdoing. It is not about saying that betrayal doesn't matter. Forgiveness is about freeing yourself from the prison of your own anger. It is a gift you give to yourself more than to anyone else." So King Darius made a decree. He pardoned all who had been punished in his anger. He opened his kingdom to joy again, to celebration, to the possibility of love. And slowly, very slowly, his own heart began to heal. "Did he ever love again?" the Sultan asked, the question that lay at the heart of his own fears. "Yes," Scheherazade said with a gentle smile. "In time, when his heart had learned to trust again, love found him, real love this time, built on understanding, on shared values, on genuine connection, and it was more beautiful, more lasting than anything he had known before."
The dawn of new love. Months had passed since that first night when Scheherazade had begun her tales. The palace had transformed from a place of fear and darkness into something resembling its former glory. Laughter could be heard in the corridors once again. Servants hummed as they worked, and the gardens, the beautiful gardens, bloomed more magnificently than they had in years. But the most remarkable transformation was in Sultan Shahryar himself. The hard lines around his eyes had softened. His voice carried warmth again, and when he looked at Scheherazade, there was something new, something that hadn't been there in the beginning, something that grew stronger with each passing day. One evening, as summer painted the sky in shades of amber and rose, the Sultan made an unprecedented request. "Scheherazade," he said, his voice gentle, almost hesitant, "tonight I do not wish to hear a story. Tonight I wish to tell you my story, my true story." And so, for the first time in longer than he could remember, Sultan Shahryar opened his heart. He spoke of his childhood, of dreams and hopes he had once carried. He told her about the man he had been before pain had changed him. Most importantly, he told her about his former queen, about the love he had thought would last forever, and about the devastating moment when he had discovered that it was all an illusion, a beautiful lie that had shattered his faith in everything he had believed about love. "I became a monster," he said quietly, his voice filled with regret. In my pain, I punished innocent people for her sins. I convinced myself that if I could never love again, I could never be hurt again. But you and your stories have shown me something I had forgotten. What is that, Your Majesty? Scheherazade asked gently. That not all hearts are false, that not all love ends in betrayal, that it is possible to trust again, to hope again, to believe again in the beauty of true connection between two souls. He looked at her then, really looked at her, as if seeing her for the first time. Scheherazade, he said, his voice filled with wonder. Somewhere in these months of listening to your tales, of watching your courage, your wisdom, your endless compassion, somewhere I began to fall in love, not with a story, but with the storyteller. I love, he continued, your brilliant mind that can weave tales of such beauty and wisdom. I love your brave heart that risked everything to save others. I love your gentle soul that saw the good even in someone like me, someone who had lost his way so completely. Scheherazade felt tears spring to her eyes, not tears of fear, as there had been that first night, but tears of joy, of hope fulfilled, of a plan that had succeeded beyond her wildest dreams. Your Majesty, she said softly, when I first came to your chambers, I came with stories, hoping to save my life, but somewhere in telling those tales, in watching you change, in seeing the good man you were always meant to be emerge from the shadows, I began to fall in love too. I love your capacity for growth, your willingness to heal, your strength in facing your own pain and working to become better than it. I love the way you listen to stories with your whole heart, the way you care about people you've never met, characters in tales that exist only in imagination. The Sultan took her hands in his own, hands that had once issued harsh commands, now trembled with tender emotion. Scheherazade, he said, will you marry me, not as a condemned bride walking to her doom, but as my chosen queen, the woman I want to spend the rest of my life learning to love more completely each day. And Scheherazade, the brave, wise, wonderful Scheherazade, smiled through her tears and said yes, yes to love, yes to hope, yes to the beautiful future they would build together with stories and trust and the kind of love that grows stronger with each passing day. The happy ending and beyond. The wedding, this second wedding, was nothing like the first. Instead of fear and sorrow, the palace filled with genuine celebration. People came from every corner of the kingdom to witness this miracle of transformation, this proof that love really could triumph over pain. that hearts really could learn to trust again. Dinarzade served as her sister's attendant, her face glowing with pride and joy. She had played her part in this incredible story, and now she watched as her beloved sister became not just a queen by marriage, but a queen by the love of her people, who had heard the tale of her courage and her wisdom. The Vizier Omar walked his daughter down the aisle, with tears streaming down his weathered cheeks, tears of gratitude that his brave child had not only survived her dangerous gamble, but had transformed an entire kingdom through the power of stories and love. And the Sultan, no longer the cold, bitter man who had ruled through fear, but transformed into the king he was meant to be, watched his bride approach with a heart so full of love, of gratitude, of wonder, that he could barely contain it all. The ceremony was beautiful, but it was what came after that truly mattered. Day by day, month by month, year by year, the royal couple built a love that became legendary throughout the land. Every evening, they would still share stories. Sometimes Scheherazade would tell tales she had collected from distant lands. Sometimes the Sultan would share stories from his own life, his travels, his dreams, and sometimes they would create new stories together. Tales of their adventures, their hopes for the future. They had children, beautiful children, who grew up in a palace filled with laughter and love, and the magical sound of stories being told. These children learned from their earliest days the power of words, the importance of compassion, and the truth. That love, when built on trust and understanding, can overcome any obstacle. Years passed, many years, and the kingdom prospered as never before. It became known throughout the world as a place where justice ruled, where stories flourished, and where love, in all its forms, was celebrated and protected. And when, many, many years later, people would ask Queen Scheherazade about the secret of their happiness, she would smile, that same gentle smile she had worn as a young bride, facing an uncertain future. The secret, she would say, is not in the stories. Those stories are important. The secret is in the listening, really listening with your whole heart to the person you love, and in never, ever stopping the conversation between your souls. And so, dear friend, ends the tale of Scheherazade, the brave young woman who saved her kingdom, not with sword or shield, but with stories, with patience, with hope, and with the unshakable belief that love, real love, built on trust and understanding, can heal even the most wounded hearts. A gentle journey to sleep. And now, as our story draws to its close, and as the night grows deeper around you, let yourself drift gently into that peaceful place between waking and sleeping, where all stories live forever. Think of Scheherazade, brave and wise, who understood that sometimes the greatest courage comes not from fighting against difficult circumstances, but from working within them with patience, with love, with hope that never gives up. Feel your body growing heavier now, more relaxed, like sinking into the softest cushions in a palace filled with peace. Your breathing is becoming deeper, slower, more rhythmic, like the gentle waves of a calm ocean lapping against a moonlit shore. Let your mind drift away now from the concerns of your day, from the worries about tomorrow. Tonight, there is only this peaceful moment, this gentle journey into the land of dreams and rest. Imagine yourself in that beautiful palace where stories live, where fountains sing, gentle songs, where the air is perfumed with jasmine and roses, and where kind voices tell tales of wonder and hope and love that lasts forever. Your own story, your beautiful, unique story, continues to unfold day by day, night by night, dream by dream. And like Scheherazade's tale, it too has the power to heal, to inspire, to bring light into dark places. Rest now, rest peacefully, knowing that just as Scheherazade's courage and wisdom created a happy ending, your own courage, your own wisdom, your own capacity for love and hope will guide you toward your own beautiful tomorrow. Close your eyes, if they're not already closed, and let yourself float away on the gentle river of dreams, where Scheherazade waits to tell you more wonderful tales in the kingdom of sleep. Sleep now, sleep deeply, sleep peacefully, and may your dreams be filled with the same magic, the same wonder, the same gentle hope that filled the palace of our beloved Scheherazade. Good night, dear friend. Good night and sweet dreams.